No one wants to say they're afraid, because if you say you're afraid, then it means you're a coward. I'd rather be a failure than a coward. The first big, felt like a death decision was I was a consultant, 22-ish years old. I had a paid for, condo that I bought overlooking the city. And I remember thinking, like, I really hope I don't wake up tomorrow. And what was difficult about that was that at that time was when my father was most proud of me. Because I was doing everything that was according to plan. He could talk about like his son who graduated in 3 years from Vanderbilt, had the good job, like everything we're following the plan. It was upon realizing that my ultimate expression of living out his dream was me feeling like I didn't want to be alive. And I realized that one of our dreams had to die, either his or mine. To put this in perspective of like how afraid of my father's judgment I was, I left the state and drove across the country halfway through before calling him to tell him that I was gone. And so I bring this up because I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but I'm saying that if you feel a lot of pressure, I get it. Like I tried to leave the job that I was at to pursue just literally anything that wasn't that. Just I wanted to start a business at some point. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that what I was doing was not the path I wanted to be on. Our relationship struggled for, years after that. And I also bring that up because sometimes there's this illusion that like, you get on the Oscar stage or whatever it is, and you're like, hey, I just want to thank, my mom, my dad, my friends for always supporting me. And I can't say that. And I wish I could. And you might not be able to say that either. And I also don't think that's a reason not to do it. And I think that when you ask the original question, what are the people from 0 to 1 really looking for? I read tons of business books at that time, but I couldn't use any of them because I was so afraid. And what's crazy is that like, I think about it now in retrospect, and it's like, it's crazy how large the perceived monsters can appear. And Layla has this quote that I love, but it's, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And so you look at it and it looks like this ocean, and then you take the first step and you realize you don't drown. Because it's like, oh, there's ground underneath of this, right? There's other people who are more on my path, and the friends you lose, you gain new friends, right? And so that fear was the hardest decision that I've had to overcome in my entrepreneurial career. And I think of all the split paths in my life, that was the one that if I had many timelines or many universes that existed, that was probably the one that is the most likely that I would not have parted from. So I think in like 90% of universes that Alex Hormozi exists, I'm just a consultant somewhere. And so I would encourage you, if you do feel that, you're not gonna die. Like you won't die, and you might just live. No one wants to say they're afraid, because if you say you're afraid, then it means you're a coward. And I think that it only means you're a coward if you allow that fear to change your behavior in an aversive way, as in it not towards what you want. And so, the inverse of that, many people have heard it, courage is not acting without fear, but despite fear. And I think that when you allow fear to change your behavior the wrong way, that is when you can give yourself that title of coward. And I think that is a title that I have feared my whole life. And that label is I'm more afraid of that label than the label of failure. I'd rather be a failure than a coward. There's a tweet that I love by Andrew Wilkinson, which is, every entrepreneur ever, here's the winning number for my lottery ticket. And so it's like, every entrepreneur will say, here's the winning lottery ticket, but it's like, that drawing already happened.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and so like you can't cash that ticket in, it's already done. And so people say the word first principles, no one really knows what it means. Some people do, but basically there are foundational truths of business that exist, and the conditions of the environment will change. And so you have to apply those truths to whatever the current condition is. And so that's what I try and tease out with the books and the stuff that I put out in content. But at the end of the day, you have an input of time, like zooming all the way out. If the goal, assuming that your goal is to make money, okay, and this is just a purely economic business goal, then you have time, which is the primary currency that you trade it, and you make dollars over a period of time. And so I tend to reject the idea of never trade time for dollars or anything like that, because everyone trades time for dollars. It's just some of us are more efficient at it than others. But even exchanges that occur that just are not denominated in time still occur over time. And so you have this foundational unit of time, which you're going to give in. What we're seeking is the highest return on that time. And so within a business context, there's kind of 3 levels of things that have to occur in a business. You have to, attract attention, you have to convert attention, and then you have to deliver something for that attention. And so, which is, you need supply and demand to have a business, and then leverage to get as much out of it as you possibly can. And so, when you're looking at the assets that you have, assets can also be skills, resources, what you have available to you. Now, if you have nothing, then all you have is your brain, your hands, and the time that you have that you can put towards learning something, which is why I'm a big fan of skill acquisition as one of the primary things that you can do is educating yourself. And not formally educating, but informally or alternatively educating yourself on super tactical things. Once you get over the fear, then you start asking, okay, how do I let people know about my stuff? And what do I let them know, right? And so you have to have something to sell, which is the offer. And ideally, you want the offer to have as much leverage as possible. Like, so if you sold software or you sold media, those are things that you can cut once, sell 1,000 times. If you have a conversion mechanism, it's like you can't have it be automated like a checkout page or some sort of video sales letter or something like that where people just buy without a phone salesperson. If you add a phone salesperson, there's less leverage. Not to say that's wrong, but you want to have the highest leverage opportunity. And then from the deliverability perspective, I kind of talked about deliverability first, but from the advertising perspective, if you reach out to people one-on-one, that's lower leverage than being able to make one piece of content that 1 million people see, right? And so over time, you go from low leverage to high leverage, where you have the same inputs, but you just get significantly more for your output. And that fundamentally is like, if we're reasoning out from first principles, how do I get said differently, the question someone I think is really asking is, how do I get the most for what I put in? And you have to reason within your current context of your skills and your resources and your assets in order to derive that solution for you. Business ideas typically come from one of 3 Ps. So it comes from a pain that you're currently experiencing, a past profession, so the thing that you just quit or some of the jobs that you just quit, or passion. So something that you're inherently interested in that you would spend your time doing anyways, some skill that you learned while you were in the workforce, which by the way is one of the most proven ways of making money because the economy has already showed you that people are willing to exchange money for that specific job. And so in the world of gig economies and solopreneurs, every business can be dismantled into just jobs being done, and all of those jobs can be fractionalized. So anybody, like, we look at any business, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got customer success, you've got customer support if you want to differentiate that, you've got product, you've got design, you've got web pages. There's so many different components to a business. You just need to learn one of them. And then it's like, boom, you have a skill that you can trade for money that you don't have anybody else to report to. And then pain is usually, I think, in some ways, sometimes one of the biggest drivers is like you had an eating allergy and you couldn't find pancakes that dealt with your specific eating allergy. And you bet that there's a decent amount of other people with that allergy that also like pancakes. And so then you make pancakes that are delicious and amazing that also cater to people with that food allergy. And then all of a sudden, like, you have a business based on pain.
And why does that matter?
I think that deep knowledge of the prospect is paramount or very important for creating exceptional products. And you can either do that by doing a ton of research or by being the prospect. I met the guy who invested in Regal Cinemas, which is probably the biggest chain in the US. And it was when there was a guy who had just one theater, and it became, now obviously COVID has disrupted that business, but for 20 years, whatever, they crushed. And he said, it was so weird to say that, cinemas are gonna make a comeback, because they'd kind of been on a downturn or something like that during the time that he was making the investment. And he said, the reason I decided to invest in it was because this guy knew everything about the business down to how much the cost of a kernel of popcorn was. And he just knew it so like the back of his hand that he was like, this guy can't fail. Like, he just knows too much about this business to not have it work. And so in investing in, making $1 gazillion. And so, but I think that deep understanding, and if you look at all of these, the passion things, you'll have deep understanding because you're spending all of your discretionary time pursuing this passion. The pain, you have a deep understanding of the problem and the prospects going through it because you've experienced it probably for years. Now, the professional one, I would say, is a bit of a shortcut, because if you're quitting the job because you don't like it, and then you say, I'm now going to do this for myself, well, you're okay. The one proven point about that is that one is proven to work from an economic perspective. you will be able to make money doing that because you already have made money doing it. I was talking to, on one of the future episodes of Mozi Tank that's coming out, we have a guy who's, he loves Dungeons and Dragons. So he's an IT guy and just loves Dungeons and Dragons. And he was like, I just want this to make enough money that I don't have to do IT anymore. But it was so pure, you know what I mean? And so I was like, we're gonna help you do this. And so we kind of walked through the business plan for it. But like, is he going to be a billionaire? No, but I also don't think that's his goal. And so I think being really clear on what you want is important. So if you're like, I want to be the richest person in the world, I think it's a terrible goal, but if you want that, great. Well, you have to have a multi-trillion-dollar idea because by the time that occurs, there's already multi-trillion-dollar companies now. So you got to be looking at like decatrillion-dollar opportunity. And so believe it or not, basically the bigger the goal, the narrower the scope of the paths to get there. If you're like, I want to make $10 million, I'm like, you can literally do that in almost any business. You want to make $100 million? Probably still almost any business you can do it. On a long enough time horizon, you can do it. A trillion or decatrillion, it's going to be some sort of tech. It's probably going to have some sort of AI. And so you get, basically the bigger the goal is, the narrower the scope of how to get there. But the vast majority of people are like, I want to be the richest man in the world, just because they don't know how to like really think through it and be like, all right, well, after like 100, there's really nothing you can't do except buy more big things. But like in terms of your actual consumption, maybe even 20 is like, you can only eat at restaurants that go so expensive. You can only stay at the best hotels. You can only drive the nicest cars. You can do that with about 25 million. What's crazy is delay discounting happens both ways. Like, so like you set your alarm for 5 a.m. at night and you're like, I'm gonna wake up at 5. But that's because you're delaying the pain of waking up. And when it's immediate, and I have to quit the job, like I'll quit my job tomorrow for 20 years. And so it's just like, we delay the fact that we're going to be miserable into the present to like we massively discount what a whole lifetime of misery would be. It can't reason the logic chain of causation and causality of what's going to happen next in a chain of events. And so when you get into the specific of it, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm not gonna be homeless and then shamed and die. I might live in inferior living conditions for a short period, which, by the way, when you're later on in your life, you'll look back and think of as the good old days, because I can't believe I was couch surfing, I was pursuing my dreams, right? It's only like in the moment that it feels bad. When you look back, like even, I find this hilarious, like how long after you do something embarrassing is it funny? Right? Like at some point, for almost all of us, with enough time, the shameful experience becomes funny. And so if it is going to become funny eventually, it might as well become funny now. Also, logic downside risk here. I'll have a story and I can always get my job back. Okay, and if I can't get that job back, I'll have other ones that will be available. Fine. And if I have a downgrading and some people think that I'm not as successful as them, okay, I'll not stop though. Like, and you just kind of play it out and you're like, okay, I think I have like most of these conditions prepared for. And then all of a sudden you can like have those things. If you want to be compelling, a demonstration or a model is always more compelling than anything else. And so me even going through that entire narrative, right, is taking everyone else who's been listening to this on some journey. It's like, if you want to make a compelling pitch for a business, it's like, we pretty much just kind of went through one. And so that's really what it comes down to. It's you're like, well, what do I do with my business? It's like, create your narrative of why you're even doing this. And if you can explain to somebody why they should care about this problem, or more specifically, why you care about this problem, I'll tell you this, more investors will, like, I might be like, I don't care about kitchen utensils, but this girl certainly does. And I'm sure there's other women who do too. And what everyone wants to see is obsession. And unfortunately, in like some of the world, I know more in the UK than the US now, like that kind of perspective of like just being all in obsessed with stuff has almost been like bastardized, or like, you know, been chastised. But the people who are obsessed are the ones who change the world, at least change their world. And so a lot of times we don't look at what I call the don't, which is like the alternate path. And so if I had played out my existing path, I had a guarantee of outcome I didn't want. It was just at a delay. Whereas here, there's a chance that I can make it. And so one of the final kind of frameworks for making the decision was guarantee bad, chance at good. And I was like, well, I might as well take a chance. And I strongly encourage thinking about playing it out. And so what I mean by that is, like, I think fear exists in the vague, not in the specific. And so when you say, I'm going to quit my job, and then what if this doesn't work? I'm going to failure, tons of fear. If I say, I'm going to quit my job, and then I'm going to try and start a business, and if the business doesn't work, I'll probably have a compelling story that I could tell for business school if I wanted to show that I had some entrepreneurial slant. In the meantime, I could use that experience plus my job experience to probably get another or maybe even better job in the meantime and match or supersede my existing income. And the actual loss would be maybe the savings that I had saved up. But if I'm younger or I haven't made as much money as I want, then that's never been the amount of money that would be material anyways on the grand scheme of what I would like to make. And in terms of living situation, I will, worst case, go back to my parents' house with my tail between my legs or sleep at a friend's couch because I have enough people that would be willing to put me up in a garage if I had to. And so it's like, okay, so my actual worst case scenario is just like, I have a cool story and maybe some shame that is self-inflicted because it's not like no one else cares really. But it's self-inflicted shame and maybe a detour or a different story that I have to tell later on in my career. Not as much fear there, right? But like the first one, like I'll fail, everyone will hate me, and I'll die. Basically, anybody who's listening, the harder it is for you to break free of whatever kind of mental prison you've made for yourself, whether that's real or just in your head, the more compelling your story will be when you break through it.